Whipped Onto the Third Generation is a pretty decent episode of Two and a Half Men. This is the second episode of the 7th season. This is directed by James Widdoes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And this one starts off at the house. Alan and his dummy have found an audience because Melissa is rather amused by Alan's dummy. And I don't think she's pretending. I think she's genuinely entertained by the dummy. And Alan has to reassure Charlie that Melissa's definitely not living there. She's just spending the night. A couple of nights. Every night. It's very clear that Melissa is indeed living in there. And Charlie rants about this to Chelsea. And Chelsea thinks, well, what's the big deal? It's absolutely fine. And I was thinking the same. But then Charlie did make a valid point. He pointed out that Alan would therefore have more people living in his house than he does, which I hadn't thought about, but it does mean that Alan, Melissa and Jake, whereas it's only Charlie and Chelsea. Although, if we throw in Sir Lancelot, because cats are people too, then it's actually a bit more of an even split. But that isn't something I thought of, and I guess that is a pretty valid point. And Chelsea is still encouraging him to let Melissa stay. Melissa is less encouraging and more demanding that Alan stands his ground and tells Charlie that she's staying there. And Alan confronts Charlie, and Charlie is initially going to say no, but then Chelsea is standing in the kitchen doorway, and Charlie ends up saying Melissa can stay. Charlie's not happy about it, but it's what he needs to do. I do think the answer machine message was a step too far, because Evelyn calls and the answer machine kicks in because, of course, Charlie's not answering. And Melissa and Alan have left an answer phone message, and it was good fun. It was fun to listen to. But yeah, I think that might be a step too far because I still feel like this is Charlie's house. I don't think Alan pays enough rent for it to be considered a 50-50 split. I think this is still Charlie's property, so I think that was maybe a step in the wrong direction. But for me as a viewer, I thought it was certainly quite good fun. And then they're dividing up the fridge space, and that's when things got real. When you have to start minimizing the space you have, that's when things start to feel a little bit overcrowded, and it feels like you have lodgers rather than your family staying there, where the fridge is there for everybody to use equally, whereas now they have designated shelves. And it kind of reminded me of my student days, and it was a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm kind of not completely on Charlie's side, but that's kind of when I started to see, yeah, I can tell where you're coming from here. And Charlie and Chelsea go out, they're looking at wedding crockery or something, and they come back in, and there are just so many people there. And this is also where I think they maybe overstepped the mark, because Alan and Melissa, and I kind of get the impression this was Melissa's idea, but they invited over a whole bunch of Melissa's friends, and they're having this party. Charlie demands everybody gets out. Nobody listens to him. Again, this is still his house, so he leaves. He has to go to a hotel because he doesn't want to be there with all of these people in his house. And again, I kind of agree with Charlie. I need my own space. If I was a homeowner and a bunch of strangers were in my house without having been asked for permission, first of all, I would be really furious. So I'm actually completely in agreement with Charlie here. Melissa has overstepped the mark on multiple occasions, and I don't think she's a very good person. She's not a bad person, but I think she's quite a selfish person, but when she loves you, she's very nice. I think she is genuinely loving and caring with Alan. I think she really loves him and wants to be there for him. But when it comes to Charlie, and maybe she disrespects Charlie because of their brief history, maybe that's why she's behaving this way. So maybe she wouldn't be like that if it was a random landlord or homeowner, but because it's Charlie, I don't think she cares about his feelings. So maybe she's an okay person otherwise. I don't know. But needless to say, Charlie should not have to have left his own house. He goes to the hotel, and then Chelsea and Melissa are talking, and they start to make decisions about how they could maybe compromise and everybody could get along, which I think was a sensible thing to discuss. But then Alan gets a little bit annoyed because he has to remind them that there's a pecking order and they shouldn't be the ones making these decisions because it's Charlie, and then when he's not there, Alan's in charge. So they shouldn't be making these decisions, and he gets kicked out and has to go to the hotel. And then it's just Chelsea, Melissa and Berta in the kitchen, and it was quite nice. It was nice to have a lot of women on screen at once because it doesn't happen that often. And when it does happen, usually they're still overshadowed in number by the men. So it was just a nice change. And then Evelyn comes over, and I thought, great, the four of them, this is going to be really fun. And then Evelyn decides to throw a spanner in the works. And she mentions that it's really nice that Chelsea and Melissa can get along despite what happened with Melissa having slept with Chelsea's fiance. And suddenly Melissa and Chelsea start arguing. And Evelyn leaves. Her work is done. The boys are sitting outside waiting for her to, as she put it, restore the balance of power. And it was evil. It was evil because, really, Melissa and Chelsea getting along is what Charlie and Alan should want. That should be a great thing. They're partners getting along with each other under the same roof. That's amazing. But no, Evelyn ruined it just so Charlie and Alan could feel like they were back in power. Well, so Charlie could feel like it and so Alan could maybe feel like he had a little power, but let's face it, he doesn't get that much say. And it was decent, and we end the episode with Jake and Celeste having some, not demands, I don't think she was demanding, but Jake wanted her to stay for dinner, and she's a vegetarian and all of these things, so Charlie and Alan are still having to make decisions based on what the females want. But again, she's a guest. I think it's fair to accommodate what Celeste would desire. So I don't have any issues with that. Not that I really have any issues with Chelsea and Melissa either. It was quite fun to see them all playing out like this, even though I'm not a huge fan of stories focusing on Melissa. I'm not a huge fan of stories focusing on Chelsea. But together, it was pretty good fun. So needless to say, I rather enjoyed this episode quite a lot. I thought Whipped Onto the Third Generation was a really fun episode of 2.5 Men. Definitely an absolute joy.